A stately mansion perched on the edge of a sprawling estate, a successful millionaire and a loving wife pregnant with his heir. It sounds like a fairy tale, right? But what if beneath the glittering chandeliers and manicured lawns, a secret mistress slithers into the picture, capturing the millionaire's heart and convincing him to do the unthinkable? In a single devastating night, he expels his pregnant wife, casting her aside like a broken keepsake. Yet the real shockwave is still to come, a DNA test that unravels every lie, forcing everyone to confront the extraordinary truth. Ready for a tale of betrayal and redemption. At 36 years old, James Harrington was already a celebrated name in the business world. Born into a modest family in Houston, Texas, he had clawed his way through relentless ambition, forging partnerships that catapulted him from suburban obscurity to a global empire. A real estate tycoon, James prided himself on his shrewd negotiations, a relentless drive to succeed, and until recently, a strict moral code. He had a prominent circle of acquaintances and colleagues, some of whom were household names. James often recalled the day he got invited to a small exclusive conference in Seattle, hosted by Bill Gates himself. It was the highlight of his fledgling success, a confirmation that James Harrington had indeed arrived. Pictures from that day featuring Bill Gates shaking his hand hung in James's expansive home office, a testament to his unstoppable rise. His wife Charlotte Harrington was a pillar of support in his life. They met 12 years ago when James was still just another dreamer in a cramped co-working space. Charlotte came from an academic background. Her father was a retired history professor, her mother a charity organizer. Though she had no interest in business, she always believed in James. She saw his potential and stood by him through every setback, shortage, or failed venture. Their marriage, at least on the surface, was the envy of many. They had the big house in River Oaks, a wealthy area near the heart of Houston, Texas. They had the parties, the philanthropic events, and a robust social network. Charlotte was the warm, gracious hostess, James the charismatic success story. And this year, they finally shared the news they had yearned for since the day they were married. Charlotte was pregnant with their first child. Yet if anyone had taken a closer look beyond the shimmering facade, they would see the cracks emerging in this house of glass. James's demanding schedule often kept him traveling for weeks at a time. Charlotte, who used to find comfort in reading and volunteering, felt lonely in the hush of their mansion. And into this void slid a woman determined to become the next Mrs. Harrington, Bianca Rochelle. An internationally known interior designer, Bianca first set foot into James's orbit when he hired her to redesign the penthouse suite of a newly acquired high-rise in Chicago. Bianca was everything Charlotte wasn't. Brazen, flamboyant, unafraid to cross lines. She thrived in the swirl of excitement around top business moguls. But behind her immaculate style and wide smile lay an ambition as intense as James's drive for success. From the moment she recognized his straying eye, a calculated plan formed in her mind. She would become indispensable to him. Their affair started behind closed doors. First, it was just business lunches that bled into late-night drinks under the guise of important design consultations. Then texts turned flirtatious, and flirtation ignited into encounters in lavish hotel suites. James told himself Charlotte would never need to know. He still loved his wife, he reasoned. He only craved the excitement Bianca offered. But illusions of secrecy rarely survive for long. Soon enough, the suspicious stares and rumors spilled among the staff and friends. Charlotte, who prided herself on loyalty and faith in her husband, tried to brush them off. She wanted to believe that James's extended trips were purely for business and that his smiling texts at odd hours were strictly professional. But whispers catch up with reality. The tension in the house soared as Charlotte's pregnancy advanced. One evening, a few months into her second trimester, Charlotte had just returned from a prenatal appointment. She had always found comfort talking to her unborn child in the hush of the expansive hallway that led to James's office. But that day, she discovered James was already home, pacing in the living room on a phone call. His voice rang through the corridor. Bianca, calm down. Of course, I'm doing everything I promised. He paused, listening to her frantic response. Look, she's pregnant, but that doesn't mean I have to stay married forever. I told you once the baby is born, we'll figure it out. Charlotte froze, the color draining from her face. Her heart pounded as she pressed herself against the wall, her mind grappling to make sense of James's words. The father of her child was plotting a future with another woman. When James spotted her, his expression hardened, caught between anger at her uninvited eavesdropping and shame for his betrayal laid bare. What's going on?" Charlotte managed, voice trembling. James ended the call. "Charlotte, you shouldn't be sneaking around. Who was that? Please tell me I'm misunderstanding." James's gray eyes flickered. In that moment, rather than confess or seek forgiveness, his pride and adrenaline spoke for him. "This isn't the time," he said curtly, brushing past her. "We'll talk after dinner. I'm too exhausted to deal with your paranoia." He withdrew to his study, but Charlotte was not going to be dismissed so easily. Within minutes, she confronted him, tears in her eyes. The argument escalated with alarming speed. Accusations, denials, outrage. James, determined to play the wounded party, twisted her confrontations into claims that she was the one who didn't understand him. The confrontation spiraled out of control until Charlotte revealed she knew about Bianca. She had seen the texts on the phone bill, heard the rumors. That night, James did something no one could have predicted from the man who had once worshipped the ground his wife walked on. He demanded Charlotte leave the house. He barked, "If you can't trust me, then pack your things. I'm sick of this constant suspicion. You're crying your guilt trips." Stunned, Charlotte tried to speak, but James stormed out, slamming the front door so hard it rattled the crystal pendants of the foyer chandelier. And so, in a fit of rage, he banished his pregnant wife from the estate, leaving her to spend the night in tears alone. The next morning, James woke up to find Charlotte gone, her favorite throw blanket missing from the couch, along with her car in the driveway. Anger still roiled inside him, but there was also a pang of guilt that gnawed at the edges of his consciousness. He tried to push it aside, telling himself that Charlotte had overreacted. Bianca called, her purring voice flooding him with sweet words about how proud she was that he had finally taken decisive action. Convinced he was doing the right thing after all, Bianca insisted, "You deserve a partner who truly believes in you." James invited her to move in. Within a week, she had installed herself in Charlotte's old rooms, rearranging furniture, clearing out personal possessions, turning the Harrington estate into her personal showroom. To James's staff, the shift was jarring, and many felt a sense of unease. The real mistress of the house, Charlotte had always treated them with dignity and empathy. Bianca was different. Demanding, sharp-tongued, and prone to flaunting her ownership of the Harrington name. Several staff members discreetly quit. Those who remained grew wary of their new boss. Meanwhile, Charlotte sought sanctuary at her parents' house in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Houston. Her mother, Margaret Johnston, had devoted her life to charitable work, volunteering at local shelters for battered women and the homeless. Seeing her own daughter arrive on the doorstep, tear-streaked and pregnant, felt like a tragic irony. Charlotte's father, Dr. Edward Johnston, though long retired from the university, still commanded a calm wisdom. He offered Charlotte his unwavering support. Days turned into weeks as Charlotte grappled with heartbreak and the humiliating reality that her husband had chosen his mistress over her. She considered legal action, but every time she picked up the phone to call a lawyer, she stopped. A swirl of conflicting feelings, shame, fear, love, anger, kept her paralyzed. She wanted to believe James might come to his senses. She wanted to preserve a family for her unborn child. Yet the calls never came. James was busy finalizing a massive real estate deal, his biggest yet, a waterfront complex in Miami that had garnered national headlines. With Bianca at his side attending galas and business events, the paparazzi soon captured them in photographs that splashed across the internet. At some gatherings, Bianca even hinted that she and James were secretly engaged, though James had never publicly confirmed anything. With no other recourse, Charlotte reached out to a family lawyer recommended by an old friend. In a private consultation, she learned that she could claim an extraordinary settlement. James's net worth had ballooned into the hundreds of millions. Yet Charlotte found she cared less about money and more about the child growing within her. Though she dreaded the idea of a custody battle, she prepared herself for the possibility. Life might have continued in that vein, an estranged marriage, A scorned wife left to fend for herself and a triumphant mistress in the mansion if not for a series of unexpected blows to James's empire. The first sign of trouble arrived with a phone call from his business partner, Daniel Cho, who had discovered a potential lawsuit brewing around the new Miami project. The land apparently had a messy environmental history, chemical dumping, toxic spills. Lawyers for a nearby community were threatening to block construction. I thought all the environmental checks came back clean, James barked over the phone. Daniel paused. We might have been misled, or the checks were incomplete. We need to address this immediately. In the ensuing chaos, James flew to Miami, missing phone calls from Charlotte's doctor about an important prenatal scan. Instead of stepping up as a father, he found himself mired in meetings with city officials, legal teams, and PR professionals. The local press smelled blood in the water. James Harrington, once the unstoppable force of real estate, was teetering on the brink of a public relations nightmare. In the midst of all this, Bianca, who had accompanied him to Miami, grew frustrated with the constant barrage of negative press and the sudden drop in James's attention. She cared little about environmental issues and far more about the luxurious dinners and photo ops she had grown accustomed to. As James's stress mounted, so did his drinking and erratic temper. Their once glamorous affair quickly became fraught with conflict. One night, after a particularly disastrous meeting with local activists, James returned to the luxury penthouse suite only to find Bianca in a sultry dress complaining that he was ruining the trip. You promised me we'd visit the design district and shop for the new house, she whined, arms folded. James eyed her with exasperation. I have bigger problems, Bianca. We could lose millions if we don't fix this. Maybe you can show a little understanding, Bianca scoffed. I'm not your punching bag. If you can't handle the pressure that's on you, I'm done dealing with your moods. She grabbed her purse and in a dramatic exit slammed the door behind her. An eerie silence filled the penthouse suite. James felt alone, drained, and paradoxically he found himself thinking about Charlotte. Had he done the right thing by expelling her from his life? Even in his anger deep down, he knew Charlotte had always grounded him. But the memory of his own pride and the knowledge of her heartbreak kept him from picking up the phone. Back in Houston, Charlotte's belly had grown round and heavy. The baby, a boy confirmed by the latest ultrasound, kicked with vigor. She spoke to him daily, reassuring him that despite the tumult, he was cherished. In her quiet moments, she found solace imagining a future where her son might grow up in a loving home, maybe not with both parents under one roof, but at least with a father who valued him. Then, on a rainy evening, Charlotte's phone rang. The caller ID read James Harrington. Her heart lurched. Against her mother's advice, she answered. Hello? Her voice trembled. For a moment there was only quiet. Then James's voice came through, subdued, almost contrite. Charlotte, how are you? I'm fine, she managed, her emotions warring inside her. Look, I know we haven't talked. Things have been chaotic. I needed to know if you and the baby are all right. Charlotte exhaled, tears slipping down her face. We're healthy, she said simply. In the background, thunder rolled. Is that all? He hesitated. Yes, for now. I wanted to tell you that I'll be back in Houston next week. We should talk. She closed her eyes. How often had she hoped for this moment? Okay, she said at last. We'll talk. The call ended, leaving Charlotte with a swirl of anticipation, dread, and a tiny flicker of hope. When James returned from Miami, tensions had reached a fever pitch between him and Bianca. Rumors circulated that the Mistress was forging new alliances among Houston's elite, possibly seeking a more reliable benefactor if James's empire faltered. But for the moment, she still resided in the Harrington estate, waiting for him with a cunning smile. Charlotte was nervous about their upcoming conversation. She arrived at the estate one afternoon at James's request. The sprawling manicured gardens that she once adored now felt eerie and hollow. Entering the grand foyer, she spotted Bianca descending the staircase as though she owned the place. Well, Bianca purred. The prodigal wife returns. A flush of anger burned Charlotte's cheeks, but she remained calm for her child's sake. "Where's James?" "In his office." Bianca waved a hand dismissively. "You might want to brace yourself. He has something important to show you." Charlotte strode down the hallway toward James's office with determined steps. She found him seated behind his massive mahogany desk, a stack of documents before him. He rose upon seeing her, something close to regret softening his features. "Charlotte," he began. "Thank you for coming." She remained standing. "What's this about James?" He gestured to the documents. "These are paternity test results." Charlotte felt her stomach lurch. "Paternity test?" James sighed, raking a hand through his hair. "Bianca told me she overheard rumors that the baby might not be mine." He held up a hand as Charlotte's eyes flashed with indignation. I know how it sounds." "But she insisted. She said she had a friend who saw you once at a clinic with another man. I didn't believe her at first, but everything was swirling out of control, so I ordered a test." Tears sprang to Charlotte's eyes, a mix of rage and hurt. "How dare you accuse me of being unfaithful?" "I was desperate for clarity," James said, his tone subdued. "I had them compare my DNA to the baby's." For a moment Charlotte couldn't speak. Then she asked quietly, "And the results?" He lowered his gaze. "They indicate I'm not the father." Silence thundered in the office. Charlotte's heart pounded in her chest, anger fueling her words. "That's impossible. I never—" She was about to shout that the test must be wrong, but James slid the document across the desk. The official letter, stamped with the credentials of a reputable lab, indeed stated that James Harrington was excluded as the biological father of the child. Charlotte's hands trembled. She could not fathom how this could be. A searing pain cut through her, both emotional and physical. "This is insane," Charlotte whispered. "I would never betray you that way. There must be some mistake." James pinned her with a pained look. "Then how do you explain this?" Charlotte's tears ran freely now. "I can't. But I swear I have never been with anyone else." Bianca appeared at the doorway, arms folded with a smug smile. "Well, that's interesting, isn't it? The test says otherwise." Charlotte faced her, voice shaking. "You set me up. You manipulated the test results somehow." Bianca rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Reputable lab. I doubt they'd risk their reputation." James stared at Charlotte, torn between the love he'd once felt for her and his swirling doubts. In that moment, he believed the test. And so, with a voice hollow from heartbreak, he said, "I think you should leave." Charlotte's world spun. She turned and left the estate, tears coursing down her cheeks, cradling her unborn child protectively. She vowed to prove the truth if it took her last breath. In the following weeks, Charlotte fell into despair, supported by her mother and father. Margaret Johnston, horrified at the injustice, asked, "Could someone have tampered with the sample?" Charlotte wiped her eyes. "It's the only explanation," she murmured. "But how do we prove it?" Margaret set her jaw in determination. "We'll find a way. James needs to see the truth." Meanwhile, James threw himself back into his work, trying to salvage the Miami deal. Bianca, emboldened by her success, began pressing him about marriage. She claimed it would strengthen his image, an engaged man building a stable future, etc. But James hesitated. Something in him still balked at discarding Charlotte completely, though the paternity test had seemingly sealed her fate. Bianca started planting seeds of doubt whenever James showed the slightest regret about Charlotte. "She lied to you. She cheated. She just wants your money," Bianca would whisper in his ear. "Don't be fooled by crocodile tears." Yet the more Bianca pushed, the more James felt uneasy. Perhaps it was the nagging sense that something still didn't add up. Charlotte had never lied to him before. Why would she start now, especially in her pregnancy? He also remembered how anxious Bianca had been to get the paternity test arranged. When he asked for details of how she'd orchestrated it, she deflected, claiming it was all handled by a very reliable friend. One evening, after Bianca had fallen asleep, James couldn't rest. He paced his office, gazing at pictures of himself and Charlotte in happier times. Sifting through old wedding photographs, he felt memories stirring her steady gaze as she promised to stand by him in sickness and in health, the gentle love in her eyes. Could that woman have truly been so deceitful? In that moment, an impulse struck him. He found the contact information for a top genetic testing lab, one that had done a complicated inheritance case for a colleague. Composing an email, James requested a new test. He wrote that he would personally come in with Charlotte to provide the samples. If Charlotte refused, then perhaps that would answer all his questions. But if she agreed, maybe there was something else going on. When Charlotte received James's email, her breath caught. A new test from a different lab, this might be her chance to vindicate herself. Immediately, she replied that she'd do it. She also demanded that James be present every step of the way, from the sample collection to the final results. This time, no chance for tampering. They set a date meeting in a neutral attorney's office. Charlotte, heavily pregnant, moved with careful steps. James offered his arm, and for a moment she saw a flash of the old concern in his eyes. It took all her restraint not to collapse into tears. The DNA samples were collected at the lab itself, sealed, meticulously labeled by neutral witnesses. Charlotte insisted on having her attorney Sophia Green present at every step. James, now more suspicious of Bianca's involvement, agreed wholeheartedly. After giving blood and swabs, Charlotte let out a shaky sigh. "This is the only way you'll believe me," she murmured, "and I'm determined to clear my name." James nodded, his voice low. "If I was wrong—" He couldn't finish the sentence. They parted ways with no further words. In the days that followed, James found himself back home with Bianca. She pestered him about what he was doing in a lab with Charlotte, but he fed her a vague story about finalizing some legal documents. Distrust flickered across Bianca's face, but she let it slide, confident in her belief that the prior test results would stand. 2 weeks later, the moment of truth arrived. James received a phone call from the genetic testing lab. The results were in. He asked for an immediate appointment, bringing along Daniel Cho, his longtime friend and business partner, for emotional support. Charlotte arrived with her attorney and her father, Dr. Edward Johnston. They gathered in a small private conference room at the lab. The lead geneticist, Dr. Amanda Brooks, greeted them solemnly. She offered them each a seat at a round table. On the desk lay a sealed envelope. Charlotte's heart hammered so loudly she wondered if everyone could hear it. Dr. Brooks opened the envelope and pulled out a sheet of paper, scanning it briefly before addressing the room. "The test conclusively shows that Mr. James Harrington is in fact the biological father of this unborn child." The air crackled with tension. Charlotte squeezed her father's hand, tears of vindication shining in her eyes. James's hands trembled on the table. He swallowed hard, struggling to speak. He managed, I don't understand. How? The other test said. Dr. Brooks frowned. "I can't comment on any other test you had done, sir, but these results are accurate. We triple-checked. There's no doubt." A wave of relief and anger washed over Charlotte. She turned to James, voice trembling with raw emotion. "You see, I never lied. I never betrayed you." James looked devastated. "Charlotte." "Dear God," Daniel Cho put a hand on James's shoulder. "We need to figure out who tampered with the first test." James nodded, abruptly rising. "Yes. I need to know how this happened." Charlotte's father cleared his throat. "I can guess," he said, glancing at James. "And I suspect you can too." Though he didn't say her name, everyone knew he meant Bianca. That evening, James returned to the Harrington estate, a storm of emotions raging inside. He found Bianca lounging by the pool in a designer swimsuit, sipping a glass of chilled champagne. The sight of her carefree posture grated on him. She greeted him with a bright smile. "You look tense. Have a drink and unwind." James's voice was low and brimming with fury. "Who arranged that first paternity test?" Bianca blinked, then gave a dismissive laugh. "James, don't start. I told you it was a reputable lab." "And which lab was that?" She took another sip of her drink. "It's a private one. My friend recommended it." "Your friend James," echoed, stepping closer, eyes dark. "The new test shows I'm the father. Her face flickered with alarm. Impossible. It's not impossible, James spat. It's the truth. You lied to me, lied about Charlotte, lied about the test. Bianca tried to play innocent, setting the champagne down. I only did what I thought was best for you. Charlotte was going to trap you with a child that James slammed his fist on a poolside table, making the glassware shudder. Stop lying. If you switched my DNA sample or tampered with the lab's process, you need to tell me now. She stood arms crossed. Fine, I might have nudged the process a bit. But come on, James, I did it for us. You wanted out of that marriage, and this was a clean way to do it. Don't pretend you weren't relieved when you thought the baby wasn't yours. He glared at her, his tone laced with betrayal. You manipulated me and destroyed my marriage in the process. Charlotte is carrying my son, my heir, and I drove her away because of you. Bianca rolled her eyes, the facade of sweetness slipping. I gave you an easy out. Don't blame me if you're too weak to stick with it. Rage washed over James like a tidal wave, but deeper than the rage was heartbreak. Pack your things, he said coldly. I want you out of my house by tomorrow. Bianca's eyes narrowed. I'm not leaving without something. I gave up a lot to be with you. James's lip curled in disgust. I'll transfer some money to your account, enough to move on. But if you ever set foot here again or threaten Charlotte, I'll make sure the law deals with you. And trust me, you won't like what I can do when I set my mind to it. She glared at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, fear flickered in her eyes. Fine, she hissed. But don't think you'll find happiness with her so easily. After everything you did, good luck. Bianca stomped away, and with that the illusions that had clouded James's mind for months were ripped to shreds. In the days that followed, James worked tirelessly to repair some semblance of normalcy. He arranged for an apology through Charlotte's attorney, then personally wrote a long letter to Charlotte pouring out his regret. But every time he considered phoning her, he froze, terrified of her justifiable rage. He also threw himself into solving the lawsuit in Miami, using the distraction to keep from drowning in shame. As news spread that Bianca Rochelle had been cast out, the social circles buzzed with gossip, but James no longer cared. He only wanted to make things right with his wife and child if they would have him. Charlotte, meanwhile, was reeling. Yes, she felt vindicated, but the pain of James's betrayal still cut deep. Her father reminded her, he's proven he's the father. Now it's a matter of the heart. Do you still want him in your life? Her mother frowned at the memory of James's actions. You have every right to move on without him. He showed you unimaginable cruelty. Charlotte nodded slowly. He did. But he's also the father of this baby. And I believe people can redeem themselves if they truly regret their mistakes. She paused, hand resting on her belly. I want to see him. I want to hear from his own mouth what he intends to do. Weeks later, as Charlotte approached her due date, James invited her to a counselor's office, a neutral place to talk. She arrived cautious and uncertain while James awaited her in the lobby, pacing. Upon seeing her, he rushed forward but hesitated, as though unsure if he could hold her. Charlotte, thank you for coming, he said quietly. She offered a curt nod. They followed a receptionist down a hallway into a cozy room with plush chairs. The counselor, Dr. Yvonne Parker, greeted them warmly, guiding them to sit. James spoke first. With halting words, he recounted how Bianca had sown seeds of doubt, how he'd allowed his pride and insecurities to overshadow his love for Charlotte. When he finally got to the paternity test fiasco, tears shone in his eyes. I let her poison my mind against you, against our child. I can never take back the pain I caused. Charlotte listened in silence, her heart clenched. When he finished, she took a moment to steady her voice. James, I understand you were manipulated, but it doesn't erase what you did, what you said, the choice you made to abandon me. He nodded, tears slipping free. I know. I was weak. I failed you. All I can ask is for a chance to earn back your trust, if that's even possible. The counselor intervened, ensuring they both had space to speak, to voice fears, and to set boundaries. The process was emotional, raw. Charlotte released a torrent of anger, fear, and grief. She told him how alone she felt, how uncertain she was about letting him back into her life. James told her he would do anything to make amends, from personal therapy to being there for every step of the baby's birth and beyond. By the end of the session, both were drained, yet a slender thread of possibility hung in the air. Charlotte agreed to let him be a part of her final weeks of pregnancy, on the condition that he maintained respectful boundaries and continued therapy. James, filled with both relief and remorse, promised to do so. In mid-October, Charlotte went into labor on a cool, rainy morning. She was still staying at her parents' house, so her mother drove her to the hospital. James, alerted by Dr. Johnston, rushed there within the hour, fear and anticipation churning in his gut. As Charlotte's labor intensified, James hovered close, hands shaking. Charlotte, drenched in sweat and pain, allowed him to hold her hand. The emotional gravity of the moment overshadowed all bitterness. Together they endured the long hours, until at last a robust cry filled the delivery room. Noah Harrington had arrived. Tears streamed down James's cheeks as he saw his son for the first time. He marveled at the tiny face, the fragile fingers. Charlotte was too exhausted for words, but her eyes reflected the same wonder and relief. In that moment, James silently vowed never to forsake his family again. In the weeks after Noah's birth, James made every effort to prove his devotion. He attended fatherhood classes, rearranged his work schedule to spend more time at home. When Charlotte hesitated to return to the Harrington mansion, haunted by memories of betrayal, James agreed to purchase a new house in the same neighborhood, one that they could choose and design together, free of old ghosts. Daniel Cho managed to settle the Miami lawsuit on favorable terms, preventing catastrophic losses. With the crisis averted, James announced a new philanthropic initiative, a sizable donation to local environmental cleanups and community education, partly inspired by Charlotte's consistent reminders of moral responsibility. He even reached out to Bill Gates's philanthropic network, hoping to join an upcoming conference on sustainable housing. Throughout it all, counseling sessions continued. James and Charlotte navigated the labyrinth of hurt and betrayal, forging a slow, cautious path toward reconciliation. Charlotte's parents, though still guarded, saw positive changes in James's behavior, and with baby Noah as a shining symbol of second chances, the possibility of a renewed life glimmered. The final blow to Bianca Rochelle's scheme came when James sued the private lab that had produced the false results. An investigation uncovered that Bianca's friend who worked there had accepted a bribe to swap James's DNA sample with someone else's. Criminal charges followed. Bianca vanished from Houston's social radar, rumored to be traveling in Europe under the patronage of yet another wealthy benefactor. Just when it seemed like James and Charlotte were finally reclaiming peace, the past came roaring back in an unexpected and public way. The first blow landed on a Monday morning. A friend texted Charlotte a screenshot of a tabloid article, "Millionaire's Scandal Love Triangle Fake DNA Test and a Pregnant Wife Cast Out." Accompanying it was a candid photo of Charlotte entering the genetic testing lab weeks prior. The article painted James as the ruthless tycoon who threw out his innocent wife in favor of a flashy mistress, only to crawl back after the truth emerged. It was sensationalized, lurid, and entirely real. Within hours, the media firestorm intensified. Talk shows buzzed with commentary, influencers dissected the drama, and social media turned James into a trending cautionary tale. Anonymous sources, likely from Bianca's camp, fed salacious quotes suggesting Charlotte was only reconciling with James for his wealth. One viral comment read, "Smart girl. Baby's her golden parachute." Charlotte was livid. "I have done nothing but survive," she told her mother, tears welling in her eyes. "And now they're calling me a gold digger." James was furious too, though he tried not to show it. He immediately called his publicist, Rebecca Green, a savvy media strategist who had handled several celebrity crises. She didn't mince words. "You need to get in front of this, James. A controlled narrative. Your voice. Her voice. Together." At first, Charlotte refused. "I'm not airing my pain like reality TV." But after discussing it with their therapist and considering the long-term implications for baby Noah, especially if rumors kept festering, they agreed to one exclusive interview with a respected outlet, the Houston Chronicle. They met the journalist Peter Laramie at a neutral location, not their home. Peter, known for his probing but compassionate interviews, promised to keep it respectful. Under the soft lights of the studio, Charlotte sat poised but guarded. James, in a navy blazer and open collar, looked solemn. The interview began with Peter asking the obvious. "Why did you stay, Charlotte?" Her voice trembled but remained steady. "Because I believe people can change. Because this child deserves the truth. And because forgiveness, while not easy, is powerful." James spoke next, his voice husky. "I let insecurity and manipulation blind me. I hurt the one person who stood by me when I had nothing. And that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life." Peter asked about Bianca. James didn't name her directly but stated, "There was someone who exploited a weak moment. She twisted things. But I take responsibility. I let her." When the interview aired, something unexpected happened. The backlash softened. Viewers flooded the comment sections with support. Messages like "Charlotte is the definition of grace," and "James owned his mistake. That takes courage" began trending. Even more surprising, donations surged to Charlotte's mother's nonprofit Women's Haven of Hope. One check arrived with a note, "For the woman who reminded us what strength really looks like." Yet not everyone was kind. A second article from a rival tabloid accused Charlotte of milking the drama for donations. James was enraged and wanted to sue, but Charlotte stopped him. "The more we fight back, the more fuel we give them. Let's show them by how we live, not what we say." Behind the scenes, Rebecca continued to clean up the PR mess. She reached out to several outlets, quietly correcting the record. She also released an official statement that Charlotte had refused any monetary settlement and had not signed any post-reconciliation financial agreement silencing claims she was chasing wealth. Still, the emotional damage lingered. At night, Charlotte sometimes lay awake, her hand on Noah's chest, wondering if she had made the right choice in letting James back in. In quieter moments, James would retreat into his office, eyes distant, replaying his failures like a broken tape. One evening, after putting Noah to bed, Charlotte found James sitting in the nursery. He didn't notice her at first. He was gazing at a framed ultrasound photo of Noah, tears streaking down his face. She stepped closer. "You all right?" He wiped his eyes quickly. "I'm just scared that I'll never be able to undo what I did, that no matter how hard I try, it'll never be enough." Charlotte knelt beside him. "You can't undo it, but you can build something better." He looked at her with raw gratitude. "I'm trying, every second." And he was. From weekly therapy sessions to attending late-night feedings, James became relentless in his pursuit of healing their bond. But the scars would remain for both of them. The public spectacle had taught them something crucial. Redemption wasn't a headline. It was a choice, repeated daily, earned, not given. Their lives had become a quiet act of defiance, not against tabloids, but against the narrative of broken things staying broken. The new house was unlike the River Oaks estate, less opulent, more intimate. Tucked into a leafy cul-de-sac, not far from the city center, it was designed not to impress guests, but to shelter a family reclaiming its future. Charlotte had chosen warm tones and open spaces. The kitchen overflowed with natural light. A swing hung from the oak tree in the backyard, and Noah's nursery was painted in soft sky blue with whimsical clouds hand-painted above the crib. Every detail was intentional. This home would carry no ghosts. James moved in 2 weeks after Charlotte and Noah, after making good on his promise to give her space. He didn't presume forgiveness. He earned it daily. He changed diapers without complaint, woke for late-night feedings, and learned lullabies. Some nights, Charlotte would awaken to find James already cradling Noah in the nursery, whispering apologies he never voiced during daylight. Their marriage, though legally intact, was emotionally on probation. Charlotte had drawn clear boundaries. They shared parenting, meals, and therapy, but not a bedroom. Her trust had been shattered once, and she needed time to see if James could piece it back together. James respected the distance. It hurt, but he understood. Instead of sulking, he committed himself to action. He started arriving early to counseling sessions, sometimes with a journal full of notes, reflections, regrets, new commitments. He read books on emotional intelligence and co-parenting. In session, he let himself be vulnerable even when the shame of his betrayal left him speechless. At one session, their therapist, Dr. Yvonne Parker, asked James, "What do you fear most now?" He answered without hesitation, "That one day Charlotte will realize she's better off without me." Charlotte looked at him startled. She saw no bravado, no rehearsed charm, just honesty. For the first time, she believed he truly grasped the gravity of his choices. Her healing, meanwhile, was a slower climb. She wrestled with nightmares, often reliving the night James kicked her out while she was pregnant and sobbing. Sometimes she'd wake drenched in sweat, her pulse racing. But James was always there now, calmly handing her water, quietly sitting beside her until the storm passed. Margaret and Edward Johnston visited often, providing emotional scaffolding. Margaret helped Charlotte adjust to motherhood, while Edward took quiet walks with James, discussing literature, philosophy, and eventually forgiveness. One afternoon, Edward paused near the swing in the backyard and said, "You know, James, trust is like glass. It can be repaired, but it'll never be the same shape." James nodded slowly. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life making something new, something better." Back in the professional world, James was rebuilding too, but differently. His business strategy shifted from domination to sustainability. Daniel Cho noticed it immediately. "You're more patient," he observed. "You're thinking beyond profit now." James smiled faintly. "I'm building with legacy in mind, not just empire." He created a scholarship in Charlotte's name, the Charlotte Johnston Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs, dedicated to supporting women with big dreams and hard beginnings. When he announced it at a gala, Charlotte sat stunned, tears rising. He hadn't told her. He took the stage and said, "This foundation honors the woman who believed in me when I was nothing, and who taught me that real wealth is built on integrity, not just assets." The room erupted in applause. Charlotte stood hesitant but walked toward him. They hugged. For the first time in public since their storm, they looked united, not because the pain had disappeared, but because they were surviving it together. At home, Charlotte allowed him back into their bedroom, not as husband and wife yet, but as two people attempting intimacy on new terms. They talked late into the night, not just about their pain, but their dreams, homeschooling options, traveling to Italy one day, how to raise Noah to be kind, brave, and curious. There were still stumbles. One evening, a casual comment about James's past with Bianca triggered a fierce argument. But unlike before, they didn't retreat into silence or blame. They used what therapy had taught them: active listening, timeouts, apologies that mattered. Bianca, meanwhile, faded from their lives. The lawsuit James filed against the lab she manipulated led to formal investigations. The technician who swapped James's DNA for another's was fired and faced criminal charges. The lab issued a public statement admitting fault, though under legal pressure, and settled quietly. Bianca was last seen boarding a plane to Europe, reportedly clinging to a new benefactor. Charlotte no longer needed to speak her name. The past had nearly broken them, but now they were building something stronger. Not perfect, not glamorous, but real. In the warmth of their new home, amid late-night whispers and a baby's laughter, Charlotte and James began to find solid ground, not because they forgot, but because they chose daily to remember and still try again. 2 years had passed since Charlotte's world came crashing down, and in those 2 years the Harringtons had rewritten their entire story. Their new home, nestled in a quiet, gated community just outside Houston, pulsed with warmth and life. It wasn't the largest house on the block, nor the flashiest, but it was theirs, chosen together, rebuilt from ruin. It had wide windows, soft colors, and a sense of safety. Most importantly, it had memories crafted with intention. Late-night baby giggles, family breakfasts with flour-dusted pancakes, and evenings curled up with bedtime stories. On a golden spring afternoon, they hosted a celebration that symbolized just how far they had come, Noah's second birthday. The backyard had been transformed into a child's wonderland. Colorful balloons arched over the gate. A petting zoo nestled near the fence. brought squeals of joy from the children, and a local magician wandered through the crowd with pockets full of tricks. A bounce castle wobbled in the breeze, its cheerful blue and yellow exterior almost as vibrant as the laughter surrounding it. Charlotte stood by the dessert table watching as Noah toddled through the yard in overalls, his tiny face painted like a lion. His curls bounced with each delighted step. In one chubby hand he held a balloon sword, in the other a half-eaten sugar cookie. James hovered near the grill with Daniel Cho flipping hot dogs and chatting with other parents. Dressed in rolled-up sleeves and a pair of canvas sneakers, he looked nothing like the polished tycoon who once chased billion-dollar deals without pause. Today, he was just Dad. Margaret and Edward Johnston arrived early as always. Edward wore a bow tie and brought a small antique children's book for Noah, one he had read to Charlotte as a girl. Margaret came armed with snacks, sippy cups, and a proud glint in her eyes as she watched her daughter thrive. "Suits her, doesn't it?" Margaret whispered to Edward, watching Charlotte glide from guest to guest with poise and joy. Motherhood, healing, all of it. Edward nodded. It suits them both. The party grew livelier as more guests arrived. Former colleagues, new friends from the parenting group Charlotte had joined, and even some of the Harrington staff who had stayed loyal through the worst. One of the housekeepers, Maria, arrived with her daughter and hugged Charlotte tightly. "I always knew you had a lioness inside you," she said warmly. Near the swing set, Charlotte and James finally reunited amid the crowd. She leaned into him as he wrapped an arm around her waist. For a moment, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The years of hardship, therapy, regret, and quiet rebuilding all shimmered between them like invisible thread holding everything together. "You okay?" James asked, brushing a curl from her face. Charlotte nodded, watching Noah squeal as he fed a carrot to a pony. "I am. I really am." The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer owned them. The nightmares had dulled, the resentment softened. They had learned to dance through discomfort and laugh through chaos. The betrayal, once a sharp blade, had been hammered into something dull, a lesson rather than a wound. Later that afternoon, it was time for the birthday cake. A pastel masterpiece shaped like a cartoon lion sat in the center of a picnic table. As everyone gathered, James hoisted Noah onto his hip. Charlotte lit the 2 candles and whispered, "Make a wish, sweetheart." Noah clapped his hands and shrieked with joy as James guided him closer. Together with Charlotte's hand resting over James's, they helped Noah blow out the flames. A round of applause followed, and for a brief second time seemed to pause a family framed in light and laughter. After cake and presents, as the sun began its descent, Charlotte slipped away into a quiet corner of the garden. She stood under the rose trellis, letting the scent of fresh blooms settle her. A moment alone. She closed her eyes and let her hand rest against the scar she once carried in her heart. 2 years ago, she stood on the edge of despair. She had been cast out, heartbroken, humiliated. Today she stood reborn, not because the world gave her justice, but because she claimed it, fought for it, rebuilt it. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "You always disappear at the quietest moment," James said, approaching her with a gentle smile. She turned, meeting his eyes. In his arms, Noah was fast asleep, his head resting on his father's shoulder. "Just thinking," she murmured. "Good thoughts, real ones," she said, stepping forward and kissing Noah's forehead. They walked back together toward the house, their steps slow and steady. Noah's soft breathing, the chatter of guests behind them, and the rustling of spring leaves created a symphony of peace. The road ahead would still have its bumps, but they had weathered the storm and come out not just surviving, but thriving. When they reached the porch, James paused. "Charlotte," he said softly, "thank you. For giving me a second chance. For believing in who I could be." She looked at him, eyes clear. "Just don't ever make me regret it." He nodded. "Never again." And so, hand in hand, they stepped inside their home as the garden lights flickered on and dusk fell, welcoming not just the end of a day, but the beginning of a new, stronger chapter. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster tale of love, betrayal, and ultimate redemption. From the moment James Harrington threw out his pregnant wife to the shocking day, a second DNA test exposed the truth. This story reminds us that even in our darkest hours, hope can still break through. We witnessed Charlotte's unwavering determination to clear her name and protect her child, and we saw James awaken to the harsh consequences of misplaced trust. In the end, they discovered that forgiveness, though difficult, can spark a second chance and a stronger, more authentic bond. If this story moved you, if it stirred your emotions, made you think, or reminded you of the power of resilience, please like, share, and subscribe. Together we can spread more stories that inspire caution and captivate. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for our next unforgettable tale.